We are all a work in progress, especially when it comes to our careers. As a student myself, I know the path ahead is not always clear, and that's what makes it yours to shape. I'm Jay, and this is Careers in Progress, where I chat to people across industry, alumni, and the world of work to break down how careers actually come together so you can feel more confident shaping your own path. We are all just trying to figure this career thing out as we go, and that's what today's episode is all about. We're sitting down together to talk through real dilemmas from students and grads, the overthinking, the uncertainty, the comparison moments, and the questions that tend to show up when you're trying to make your next move to make sense. No perfect answers, no right path, just an honest conversation, a few lived experiences, and some practical ways to think things through when it feels a bit unclear. And if nothing else, hopefully a reminder that you're not alone in this. And to help me unpack all of that today, I have brought in someone who really knows this space. With years of experience across careers and employability and works with me here at DeakinTALENT, Shehani, welcome to Careers in Progress. I'm super thrilled for this conversation.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
It is my absolute pleasure. Now, it will not be a Careers in Progress episode without a traditional way of starting it. Please enlighten me with something that feels like a work in progress in your life or career right now.
Yeah, good question. Well, firstly, seeing and hearing myself on video will be one of them soon. But in all honesty, it's a boring answer. Nothing too exciting, but very much work in progress in life is building healthy habits. I think it's probably something a lot of people can resonate with, but trying to keep away from screen time, healthy lifestyle, all of that stuff is definitely a priority and a work in progress for
me. It is indeed a priority. Shehani, thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you and obviously to be working alongside. Now, I do have the privilege to be knowing you well as a colleague, but for our listeners, I would love to enter into a bit of a rapid fire and a quick fire round so as they could know you better. Are you ready for it? Now, what's your current role in one sentence and what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so I help run some internship programs at Deakin. So sad to say, my days are a lot of the time full of meetings and lots of emails, but really lucky I get to work with students, support our industry partners as well. So I have a pretty fun role.
What was your very first job?
So my first job, I probably had two that I had at the same time. So my first job was a student ambassador at Deakin, which hopefully a few of our listeners can probably relate to. I was also a retail gal, so I worked at Cotton On and, it really helped me with my folding, putting away my clothes, all of that. So, yeah, great first jobs.
So you literally started off at Deakin and that was your first job as student ambassador?
Yeah,
Which
that's
year
right.
was it, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, my goodness. 2009, 2010. Wow. It was a long time ago, a whole different world.
What an incredible journey. Now, how did you first end up working in careers and employability? Was it always something you wanted to do or just kind of pave the path?
It was definitely luck. So it was definitely something I fell into. I had no idea that working in careers was even a thing. When I was studying at Deakin, I applied for like a marketing trainee type job at the careers service. I had no idea what it was all about, but I was like, oh, it sounds interesting. And it kind of propelled my career in a way that I never would have imagined. And here I am 15 years later, have done many, many different jobs at Deakin, work with amazing people. But I had no idea this is where I was going to end up. So it was very, very much a surprise for me.
I think the younger version of you would be super proud today. But then if we go back in time, what did you think you would get up to in your career? Do you think the young Shehani would say the same thing?
Young Shehani didn't even know what careers was, like what is even a job? But in all honesty, when I was a very young kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And I know that sounds so weird. And I'm sure once I explain why, the archaeologists listening to this podcast will be like, that sounds ridiculous. The idea of sitting there with a paintbrush, finding a dinosaur bone and making like a grand discovery was something that really appealed to me as a kid. So don't ask me why, but that's what I thought it was going to be. So clearly did not land there at all.
That's so cool. So did you end up actually finding something in Melbourne or not?
No. It was, I don't know. I think it was like the idea of making a discovery and getting famous and I don't know, maybe being able to just chill there with a paintbrush, finding a bone, Again, archaeologists, don't come for me, please. I know that's not the actual job, but...
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now that you're 15 years into your careers right now, right? Super brilliant at what you do. What is that one piece of career advice that you keep coming back to?
Yeah. This is actually from my mum, who is herself an amazing business person back in Sri Lanka. So her thing that she's always drilled into me and my siblings actually is to never stop learning. And I know that people kind of provide that advice in different ways always, but just being very curious, taking the steps to actually learn, upskill yourself, and then teach other people as well. Something she loves doing is learning stuff and then passing it on to us as well. So I think something I'm always looking to do as part of any role that I'm in is to learn how to do things myself and then to share that knowledge with other people as well. So that's something I always come back to. And of course, in my WhatsApp family group, she's always sharing stuff with us. So it's always something back of my mind.
Oh, Shehani, that's amazing. So I think it's time we should put all of these experiences and insights to work. And now it's time for today's career dilemmas. Are you ready? Now, I'm going to be talking to you about some career dilemmas and would love your advice on the same. So, career dilemma number 1. Am I hustling or just stress decorating my life? I have been putting an enormous amount of effort into my job search. I'm tailoring every application, getting extra certifications, working multiple roles while studying full time. But the more I do, the more I wonder if I'm actually being strategic or just staying busy to avoid the anxiety of not knowing. How do you know when you're doing enough? And how do you stay sane when the outcome is completely out of hands? I relate to that so much.
Yeah, I think a lot of students and graduates would relate to that. And I think it's a really good dilemma. So thank you, whoever submitted that anonymously. But it's a really big one to unpack. And like you say, probably a very common story for a lot of students and very much a big two-parter. Like, how do you assess if you're doing enough? And also, how do you stay motivated during your job search as well? Because it is very taxing. It takes a lot of effort and you put a lot of yourself into it as well. So, yeah.
I think it's the same thing with me as well. Whenever I'm submitting, like, let's say, applications for job, I'm always tailoring it, I'm always following the process and all. Sometimes it actually breaks my heart when I don't listen back. Like they tell you in these networking events, tailor every application, like contact people on LinkedIn. But the truth is, what do you do when they never get back to you, right? How do you stay motivated in that?
Absolutely. I want to touch on the point you said earlier in terms of submitting all of the applications and tailoring it every time, because it sounds like this student and many other students are probably doing the exact same thing and thinking, where am I actually going wrong? And I think the common thing that you'll probably hear people say, and I know I've said it to students a lot, is take comfort in knowing you're doing all the right things. It's a phrase that we use a lot in careers, and it's a nice one to use because it gives people confidence that, I'm doing everything I can. But on the flip side, I think people do reach a limit, and that kind of burnout from your job search is very, very real for people as well. So I think it's also thinking about structuring your efforts. How are you actually doing the tailoring? How are you actually putting in that effort, and what does that look like? If I can give you an example.
Oh yeah, if you're talking about structure here, like, please just be
structuring your efforts. So a student might say, I've submitted 100 applications, but they're a little bit generic. I haven't spent a lot of time on that. Versus 30 applications that are okay, you've put a little bit of effort into it, versus 10 applications that you have actually legitimately spent a lot of time researching and tailoring. It's sort of thinking, all right, which approach are you going to take? And you kind of have to be comfortable with, if that's the approach you're going to take, that's the return that you're potentially going to get through your job search as well. So I think it's probably up to people to decide which bucket they want to be in as well. But obviously, it sounds like this student is doing fantastic work, so they should be very proud.
Brilliant timing with the fact that you mentioned structuring your approach. I spoke to my best friend yesterday and we were discussing about how we're supposed to do the internships and all, and she submitted an application for a journalism internship. She heard from one, but the other one she did not, and she's like, I'm not saying yes to the other one because the one which is pending, I'm still expecting a reply from them. So I asked her, out of the scale of 10, 10 being the highest, what is the probability or what's the score like that you would expect a reply from them? And she's like, 4. Then it made me wonder, am I actually supposed to submit the applications when like no shade on her, but just from my own experience, when I know that I'm not putting in 100% efforts, would you still recommend submitting the applications, or always it needs to be spot on and then do it?
I guess it's a tricky one because you have to think about the the realistic situation, right? In terms of the motivation that you need to have to actually tailor every single application. That motivation is not always going to be there when you are balancing study, if you're still studying, your personal life, your social life, work, all of that sort of stuff as well. So I think what people kind of need to think about is my recommendation is just feeling comfortable with this is the effort I'm going to put in. This is what I can physically actually allocate from my mind and my kind of resources that I have. This is what I can allocate to my job search and be comfortable with that and not compare yourself to others and saying, well, this person's doing like 50 applications a week. I'm only doing 10. Just knowing that everyone has a different level of capacity. Not everyone feels as inspired as other people always. So I think also feeling comfortable with, if you're submitting a series of applications and you can say hand on heart that you have done your very best effort at that, I think you should take comfort in that. But I think that's not always going to be the realistic situation. If you find a job that you really want to apply for tomorrow, you don't have time, you do the best you can. And I think that's also okay. And that's what all of us can sort of do in life, is doing the best that you can in the situation. And sometimes it's luck, Jay.
Of course.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of luck, which is really, really hard because you just don't know who's on the other end of those job applications.
For sure. If I possibly talk about myself here, let's say I'm almost 6 months into my graduation, right? And possibly I would assume other students who might be getting serious about their careers now would be listening to us. What do you think is the best strategy? Should I start applying for jobs when I'm in my last trimester alongside studying, like proper full-time job applications? And do you think I should set like a benchmark for myself that I should be applying at least 10 roles properly every single day? Or I should wait until, I get my results back and like plan it later on? What's the best advice from your side?
It's a really good question. And I think it's also important to remember that kind of graduate job search, especially the first job that you're getting out of university. I mean, you are very lucky if you have it lined up before you graduate. There are a few people who do that.
God.
Blessing. Very, very lucky. Blessing. But that's not everyone's journey, and the majority of people don't have that. So considering that, it may take someone a month, 3 months, 6 months. It took me 6 months to find my first job back in, I won't say when, the year, many years ago. So everyone's journey will be really different in terms of length. So I think more so than planning when should I start, when's the optimum time, thinking about what do you actually realistically have on your plate and when are you most inspired, when do you feel like you're in the best mood to actually write these job applications? Because if it's in the last 2 weeks of your final trimester and you're also balancing exams and you're balancing all sorts of other things, I think that's going to be really tricky for some people, whereas some people, that's the motivation. They're like, this is when I'm at my prime. So I think it's probably thinking individually, when are you most best placed to write a really good job application? But there's never any harm in starting early. I think some of our key messaging always is it's never a bad thing to get started with those things early.
So when you say start early, sorry if I'm cutting in between.
No.
How early? Like, let's say I'm 6 months into my graduation now. Not say graduation, like until I finish my degree, technically, assuming I will pass all the subjects. So do you think...
Good luck to you,
Good luck.
I'm sure you will.
Much needed. So do you think, am I late for this? Am I on the right track? Or how would you suggest?
I guess, and I'd hate to be like, it depends on who you are, but it really does. It depends on what types of roles you're applying for, what industry you're in. I know there are students in the creative industry that are not going to be applying for a full-time job. They're going to be applying for different pieces of casual freelancing work. So for them, they could technically start whenever they wanted, whereas there are students who are applying for full-time jobs, in which case, if you apply 6 months ahead, you get an offer, they may want you to start a bit more immediately. So it is a little bit dependent on the types of roles you're actually looking for in terms of when you actually start that process. What I would say is if you're not ready to start applying, still look and see what's out there, so that you can kind of get it into your mind, okay, these are the types of roles I'm interested in. These are the types of things that align with my course, so that you actually know what's out there. You have a little bit of knowledge before you go into it as well.
For sure. As I said, obviously, and as you mentioned initially, that every individual's experience would vary. But let's say if somebody has to keep a benchmark and have to give in their 100% in job applications alongside managing the side hustles that they have and being a full-time student, right? Let's say we specifically talk about somebody who's in the last 3 months of their study period. How many job applications would you recommend doing almost
Jay,
every single
I
day?
feel like you need a number from me, but I don't know if I'm confident going on record giving a number because then people will be like, Shehani told me I had to do 10 applications a day. It's a really tricky one because, like I said, I think it really depends on the individual's person's like capacity to do that. And some people naturally have, if I will say it bluntly, like the gift of writing an application and getting them really like pumping them out pretty quickly. And those people, yeah, they could do, 10 applications a week, but I don't think that's quite as realistic, especially when you're studying. So I don't quite think there's an actual number that people should be aiming for. I think it is entirely dependent on that person's capacity and also what jobs they actually want to get into. There are some careers where you're not going to have 10 jobs a week that you can apply for. You might have one job a month that will come up that will be suitable for what you're applying for. Hence why it's good to kind of do that research before you actually start applying so that you can get a feel for, are there a lot of jobs out there or do I have to kind of rethink what I'm actually applying for as
sure.
well? So off mic, I'll give you the number, Jay.
Okay. So Shehani, I feel like the student is definitely putting in a lot of efforts and probably is not receiving the results as expected. Any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think hopefully students will really resonate with kind of what we're hoping to unpack here. But with, again, a student who's doing all of the right things, I think it's also about thinking, all right, let's try and be a little bit strategic about the types of roles that we're looking at as well. Like I said, there may be plenty of roles in their industry. There may not be a lot of roles in their industry. So it's also about each student thinking, okay, how am I going to get that first opportunity, that kind of stepping stone, that first foot into the industry? And sometimes it's not always going with the most obvious roles because firstly, there's going to be a lot of people applying for those roles. So it's about thinking, all right, strategically, I need to get into this industry or this type of organization. What other kind of aligned roles are there that I can apply for? So, for example, it might be if we have a health student, they're applying for health promotion roles, they're not having a lot of luck getting into that first kind of graduate role, thinking about what's a role that I can learn from the right people, be in the right environment that I can then leverage for a role in the future. And that might be an administrative role within a health-based organization where you're not necessarily doing kind of that health promotion work, but you are meeting the right people, you're networking, you're learning, which might then give you an opportunity in the future to leverage that experience for that dream role that you wanted as your first step out of university. So sometimes it's not always as straightforward as I'm going to get this role and that is the one role I need to get. It's also about thinking about other pathways that you can kind of get there as well. So sometimes it's about thinking a little bit creatively about your job search as well.
I love the point that you made about restructuring the way you apply for jobs and I look for multiple roles which are kind of related to what you've studied, because I have something to tell you here. I had a senior of mine when I went to the UK to do my bachelor's degree, and I was speaking to her about, hey, what's your ideal way to apply for jobs? And she suggested me a flowchart method. I said, okay, what's the flowchart method? She said, okay, write the degree that you've studied and make some columns under that of what it equates to. Like, let's say 4 skills that you've learned that stand out, and then find out, do some research on the internet, what those skills equates to in professions. And then she said, I would make sure that I look for, save jobs, put them under different folders in like Seek and LinkedIn, whatever platform is the most suitable one. And then instead of just going with the most obvious ones, I am actually equating my skills into professions and applying to the relevant ones. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great concept. It's absolutely aligned with, another way of doing what we just spoke about is kind of thinking a little bit more broadly in terms of your job search, and also not seeing that as a failure in any sense, because people probably have an idea of what they want to do straight after they graduate. And if you kind of take a little bit of a sidestep to get there, that is not a failure in any sense. So I think it's also that mindset shift as well a little bit.
For sure. And one last question about this dilemma. how to stay sane when you're doing that? Knowing that there is so much happening, knowing that I have so much on my plate. Any recommendations? Do you
Yes.
recommend any mindfulness activity or anything?
Well, mindfulness activities are always a good thing. It's going to be different for everyone, right? In
For
terms
sure,
of what
for
feeds
sure.
their soul. Is it going for a walk, eating some good food,
Apply jobs on the beach. Make the
applying for
most of
jobs on the
Australia.
beach? Sign me up. I'm there. Some of the things that I've kind of observed, firstly, not comparing yourself to others, because I think that's the downfall of a lot of people. They're like, my friend studied the same course. How come they're doing X, Y, Z and I have not found anything? I think it's also about leaning into your trusted voices. And what I mean by that is you might have lots of people around you that are giving you lots of career advice about, oh, this is how you should do your resume, or no, don't do that. Who told you to do that? Do this instead. And you kind of end up with this big muddle of, okay, there's like 10 different strategies people have told me about, plus this recruiter gave me feedback and this other person gave me feedback. And I think it's also thinking, who are the people I'm actually going to use as my trusted voices so that I don't get to a point where I burn out because I'm trying to do 15 different job search strategies when really you should be really focused in on, whatever it is you feel comfortable doing. So I think considering who your trusted voices are and knowing that you will get there in the end. And I know that
For
is
sure.
a very
For sure.
easy thing for me to
Yeah.
say, but as I said before, I've worked at Deakin for a long time, have supported many graduates and students who have felt this exact same dilemma, and all of them have made it there eventually. Their journeys have been very different, but knowing that you will achieve that goal, your journey might just look not as straightforward as you thought it was going to be. So taking some comfort in that.
There is always light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you, Shehani. I think that takes us to the next career dilemma. Am I actually behind or just standing next to people on different timelines? I often am working with people elder to me. It somehow makes me feel that I'm lagging in the professional world because of the work they have done in the past. It kind of gives me self-doubt, questioning whether I'm ready for this role or if I am doing justice to my job. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I know that I've felt that way myself for sure. So there was one particular job that I remember getting into and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing here? Am I good enough for this? Are people going to like me? What is going on? And that self-doubt and what we call kind of imposter syndrome in a way, like questioning, do I deserve to be here, is a very natural human reaction. So this person definitely shouldn't feel bad that they're feeling that way, because I think it also shows that they really care about what they're trying to do and they care about the work that they're in as well. But it is a very common thing, especially for, I think, new graduates as well to feel.
I think that's the thing, right? You can see it in two different ways. One way you can see that, hey, I'm in a room surrounded with people who are quite elder and then I'm the youngest one here. Or the other one would be, well, they're doing so well in life and I feel like I'm, just lagging behind in life. That's the thing. Comparison kills the joy. So what would you think? Like, what would you say? Why do we automatically compare ourselves to people with more experience? Do you think you've come across situations, and definitely students might have approached you with this, question that I'm automatically comparing myself to other people. So how do you avoid that situation?
Yeah, I think it's very natural for people because I think when someone gets into a role, they feel like they need to prove themselves immediately, prove themselves that they have the capacity and they can do the role, hit the ground running as soon as they get into the doors day one. But I think what a lot of people forget sometimes is, especially as a new graduate, people are not expecting you to know absolutely everything. Even for people who've been working quite a long time, you take 3, 4, 5 months to actually settle into a role. So not putting pressure on yourself to, from the first week, know everything about your job, because I think that is an impossible task. And you also need to settle into a role. There's very much a period of time where you are learning and people expect you to be learning and asking questions. So it's natural, I guess, for that self-doubt to come up, but also it's part of that learning process of starting a new job.
So Shehani, thinking about myself, let's say when I go for an interview and will be considered a recent graduate soon after finishing my degree, I find it very hard to navigate the fine line between selling myself to the particular employer that, hey, I have these set of experiences, but I also want to convey it nicely that I'm a very curious person. I love to learn. I'm ready to take up new things that you would want me to. but it's just too hard for me to be like, hey, I have these set of 5 skills that I can bring into the job application and, like a good charismatic personality and all of that. But again, how do you juggle between this idea of how much to sell myself to an employer in an interview and what are the points that I should keep in mind when I say I'm a quick learner as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a hard balance because you also don't want to sound like, oh,
That
I'm
you
too
don't
good
know.
for this
Yeah.
job or I don't know
Or too
anything.
naive. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
like the 2 levels, like you're super intelligent or you're naive. Like I just want to be somewhere in the middle. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think in terms of graduates in general, and you use the word curious, which I think we love, and a lot of employers also love that aspect of graduates being really curious about their industry, about the work that they do. I think through an interview or through an application process, showing an employer that you've been curious enough to do some research, that you have a level of understanding, you can draw in things that you've learned from your course into your interview as well. I think being open to feedback as well. I think it's a really great thing for an employer to see that you are there, you're willing to learn, but you don't know everything. So you are keen to get feedback to develop your skills as well.
Right. So now to round out, any final thoughts about this career dilemma that a student can look for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think being in a new role where you are feeling a little bit like you are not where everybody else is, like I said at the start, a very, very normal feeling to have, but thinking about ways that you can build comfort with being around people who are a lot more experienced than you. I think a great way of doing that is to seek out a mentor. So it's something that maybe a lot of people have heard the word mentor in the capacity of your university life, getting a peer mentor, but those types of relationships also exist in the workplace. So actually seeking out someone whose career really interests you or whose job you want to be in one day, that sort of stuff, but to actually learn from someone who's maybe been at that organization for a little while, who can kind of provide you with that feedback and assurance that you are actually doing a really great job, but can also provide you with some guidance about how to kind of navigate the workplace a little bit. I think it also comes down to showing a really genuine interest in other people. When you're feeling like, oh, I'm a little bit unsure about the people around me, how do they see me? Am I living up to their expectations? Building those connections with people is really, really important. So showing that genuine interest in building relationships, learning about their career journeys, and also respecting the work that they do at the organization, because coming in as the new person, getting the balance right between showcasing your skills, but also like respecting the work that's already been done and respecting, the experience that people have. I think there's a bit of a fine balance there when you come in as a new graduate. So just paying attention to those kind of cues in the workplace is really important as well.
Thank you again. That is goldmine worth of advice, Shehani, I must say that. Well, keeping the traditions alive as always, that we are almost at the end of it. Now, I would like to ask you for a recommendation that you can leave with us today, probably something that has helped you in your career or mindset lately.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to give you a tangible thing or a quote or a book. I'm going to go maybe rogue. I don't know what other people will say in their podcast episodes, but it's kind of a mindset for me, I suppose, which is, and I say it bluntly, is just being a human with other people. So a lot of things I've observed in various workplaces, working with different people, is to take opportunities to actually be kind and treat people as human beings, I think is so, so important.
For sure.
Sometimes a process or a situation can get in the way of that a little bit, but just, doing the little things for people, telling someone their Zoom background is backwards, sending them a little message to let them know, whether it's giving someone a shout out and letting them know that you really appreciate the work that they do, or just the little things around the office and in different workplaces. I always come back to that is there's a situation in front of me, but how do I actually tackle this as a human being and treating people with respect and kindness? So hopefully that's a good note to end on.
That is so thoughtful of you. And again, thank you so much for taking time out for this episode. I'm really grateful.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure talking to you. And that's a wrap. If you're listening and some of this felt familiar, the overthinking, the comparison, and the am I doing enough moments, you're definitely not alone in that. It's clear that these seem to be really normal parts of figuring out your career even if they don't feel that way in the moment. And as always, if you got something out of this, share it with a friend who may need it, and do not forget to refer to the show notes that will link you through to my Deakin Talent for more career resources. And it is a goodbye for now, but not forever, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye bye!